Hello everyone, I'm a tutor with UPLADS and today we are going to continue with our SQL training. In our previous lecture, we studied a little bit of some basic string functions such as concat underscore ws, field function, find and set, format, insert, L case, U case, lower case, lower and upper functions. Today we are going to continue with few more string functions and those will specifically be dealing with spaces and some null issues as well. So to start with, our first command for today is lpad. Now what does this lpad do is this function left pads a string with another string to a certain length. So let me demonstrate it to you. So select lpad function. Consider I am giving something like this. This is my string to which I have to add some padding. Now, let's say I want a string of length 10 ultimately, and my padding should include ABC or something of that sort. So when I do this, I get a new string. You can see that before SQL, that is on the left hand side of SQL, that is my original string, ABC is added so that the total length of this string equals to the length that I have given. So when I check the length, and as I had already told you, it's always better to use char length than length to identify the number of characters present in the string. So as you can see that the output is of 10 characters, and that's what I had given as an input to my lpad function. So let us try to play around with this. Now here, as you can see, ABC was appended once, ABC was appended the second time, and the third time the requirement was, since we have to complete only 10 characters in that word, I already have SQL with me. That is 3-letter words. So basically I have to add 7 characters before my string so that my total length comes to 10. And that is why you can see that only A got added the third time and not B and C. So that is what lpad function does. Now, where do we use this lpad? Generally, it is not with respect to space. If I want to add some, it is generally not with respect to adding some extra characters. It could possibly using space as well. So if I add one space to it and then I enter, so you can see that my SQL has some letter in it, some spaces in it. And if I go ahead and check the length of it, here it is. It comes out to be 10. That means 7 spaces were added before or on the left hand side of my original string. That is what lpad does. Now there are different scenarios where you can make use of this. This is a string function. So it generally happens that you want to add some spacing before your database storage or before a particular column. In those cases, you instead of manually updating those spaces, uh, you can do one thing is that you can keep a lpad function on that particular column, and you can automatically add the spaces or any number of characters before your actual word. Let's say there could be a scenario when my column says the course name, which says SQL. Now what I want to do is I simply want to add something before it. Okay, I want to add uplads before it and something with hyphen, and here I will probably increase my number. So now you can see that it got added this way, but that is what not was not my requirement. So what I'll do is I'll count the number of characters. I already have 3. Here I'm adding 7. So total 10 should be fine. So my now course name gets updated this way. It gets updated to uplads-SQL. This becomes easy for me also without counting space. How many characters do I need to add before my actual word? And since we have something as left pad, we should have something as right pad as well. So exactly opposite of this, we have R pad. What it does is, to the right hand side of the original string, it will add it will add another string, and together it will be of 10 character length. So as you can see, uplads hyphen got added after SQL. Again, be aware that there is no space that I have given here, and that is the reason even RPAD did not include any space between SQL and uplads. If you want some space, you have to add it manually and give that command to the system, because RPAD will not understand difference between two different words. So that was LPAD and RPAD for you guys. Next, we move on to LTrim. Now, since we also spoke about these spaces, we should have something with us so that we can compare two strings which are of equal length. Now, sometimes it might happen that, let us try to demonstrate it. Equal to, I am adding another. Okay, so now if you can see, SQL is equal to SQL, but the problem was with the number of spaces. There were few spaces before SQL, here we had few spaces after SQL, and that is the reason the output for this was 0. That means it did not match these two string literals. For the system, these two are different words, as there are few spaces before SQL and here there are few spaces after SQL. So both of them get uh, translated into a different ASCII code, and that ASCII code does not match, and hence the output is 0 here. That means these two variables, these two literals, string literals, do not match. Now how do we handle that space? We generally prefer to use LTrim. I'll come to comparison soon, but first let us understand the LTrim function. So if I do this, you can see that the spaces are now reduced. Okay, how do you come to know that the spaces are reduced? Okay, so first we will take char length of the existing string. It says 7. That means we have 4 spaces before SQL. Okay, now we are going to trim this function, trim this string. So we are going to do L trim here. Okay, so when I do L trim, there's one more bracket. Now what will happen, whatever spaces are present on the left hand side of the string will be trimmed. And when I trim this, okay, I guess, yeah, there is one mistake. Yes. Now if you can see, after trimming, after doing a left trim, when I take character length, it comes out to be 3. That means the 4 spaces before SQL are now trimmed. But LTrim only trims the left hand side spaces. That is, whatever spaces are present on the left hand side of the string will be taken off. What if I have something like this? So in this case, you can see that the total length that came out was 12. What exactly happened inside? We'll try to figure that out. LTrim. Let us pass this here. Now if I pass this, you can see that only the spaces that were present for initially before S were trimmed. Before T, there is one space which was not trimmed, because before this space there are some characters. So what LTrim understands is, any variable, any string that is starting with spaces, only those spaces are trimmed. So if I pass this string to the LTrim function, it will not trim this middle space here, because there are some characters before this space. It will only trim those spaces which are present at the start of any string. So that was LTrim for you. Similarly, we have right trim for us. As we know, that we have L trim trims only the left hand side spaces which starts of the string which starts with any spaces. Similarly for R trim, what it does is it will trim only the right hand side spaces. So let's say I have something like this. Okay. Now what it will do is all the spaces, any string literals that are ending with spaces and there are no more characters after spaces, only those spaces will be trimmed. So when I run this, you can see that the spaces are taken off. How do you understand that? We'll try to take the length of our string. I'm sorry, char length. So when we do this, we select our string with spaces on the right hand side. I'm sorry, we'll include spaces here. That does not include it. So when I pass this, I have total character length of 19. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 character length. Originally, SQL space training is 12 character length and we have additionally added 7 spaces here. So my total length comes to 19. Now what if I trim this? It should give me only 12 because it has trimmed my spaces. So when I run something like this, let me write R trim here. So now you can see that the spaces that were present were trimmed, and then when we take the char length of it, we get 12. That means we understand that the spaces are now trimmed. So that was L trim and right trim for you. Now coming to the trim function. We also have trim function in MySQL. Also, there was one thing that I need to demonstrate to you. Let's say our string is something like this. There are spaces before, there is our string literal in between, and there are some more spaces after. Here, what is expected by rtrim is only end spaces are removed. So as you can see, the end spaces are removed, but the spaces before that are still there because that is not understood by rtrim. So how do we validate whether our string is changed or not? We'll take the char length and we will try to, okay. Now this is 34, okay. After trimming, it is 34. Now what if I don't trim? What if I don't trim? Yeah, here it is. So originally it was 44. That means it had 10 spaces here that were removed by rtrim. Okay. Now, how do we understand that only right side spaces were removed? So we will give something which is easy for us to understand. We'll give only two spaces. Training, 1, 2, and before that we will give just one space. Okay. We have one space here and we have three spaces here. See, 1, 2, 3. We have three spaces after SQL training and we have just one space before SQL training. Okay. Now this will give me something like this. Let us try to take the char length of this. And now I close it. This is the original string. This is the trimmed function. Wait. Now this is okay. There are total 16 characters in this, and we already know that 12 characters are for SQL training, string literal, and we have added 4 spaces in total, one before SQL training and 3 after SQL training. Okay, so now if I apply rtrim function to it, only these 3 spaces should be killed, and I should get char length as 13. So when I do that, I have to add a rtrim function here. And when I do this, my output should be now 13. As you can see, the 3 spaces that were present at the end were trimmed by rtrim function, while the space that was initially present is still in the literal count. So that was R trim for you, and same thing would happen with L trim as well. Now moving to next is our trim function. Let us try to trim our things. We had something like this. Okay, huge spaces we had. Okay, normally if I print it, just see how my output looks. Okay, it appears this way. Okay, now what I will do is I'll simply trim my string. You can see that all the spaces are taken off. What trim does is, it will not take off only left trim function and right trim function. It will trim both the spaces at the start and at the end. Why trim came into picture was, initially it was necessary that to take off all the spaces at the start and at the end, we had to use left and right trim. We had to use two functions, and to overcome this issue, there came a new function into the picture, that is trim function, where only one function is capable enough of taking off spaces at the start and at the end. So this main use case where you can use this string function is that what happens is, whenever you have, let's say you have some product wherein users are registering into your system. So while they're registering into your system, they have the asset, they have this they can directly input their name into that web form, and while giving their name, they can have as many number of spaces as they want at the start or probably at the end. Okay, but it is with database that we need to handle that. Let's say there is some user ABC in our system. Okay, the way had given the data in that web form was something like this: space, 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 ABC, and again 3 spaces. And while we were retrieving data for this user, we were simply searching for ABC. Okay, now what happens is that we don't find that user in our system, which is actually not correct, because we have ABC in our system. It's just that the way ABC has input into that web form was with spaces, and it is the database work to handle all such kind of issues. So here, to compare this, what we could have done is, we'll simply use the trim function. So now you can see it has trimmed both the spaces, and now it is matching on the left hand side and at the right hand side. It is generally recommended that you use a trim function on both the sides when you are comparing string values. That is because it could happen that in this example, you might give one single space, as it is a manual error. And whenever manual error is involved, you will not be able to identify. In this case also, you can see that it has taken off all the spaces and it has compared. Okay, so here it is generally recommended that you trim both the functions and you get a proper output. Okay, so that was trim function for you, and this was the use case where you will be trimming spaces from both the ends and then comparing the strings to avoid any kind of space issues or any kind of string literal comparison issues that you might be facing. It's always recommended to use trim on both the sides. Now, moving on to our next. This was all about spaces, how to handle space in SQL. Now this might now this string functions, these are very specific string functions. Many of them are available in all the platforms. So if you are using Microsoft SQL Server, in those places also it would be possible that most of the functions are common. So you can use it as it is. It is just the number of parameters, or maybe sometimes the naming convention is different. So that you can get the syntax from their help section of the platform. But these are the most common functions that can be used as it is. So now moving to our next function is mid function, MID. What this function does is, it extracts a substring from a string starting at any position. So there are 3 parameters that I need to give to mid function. First is the string function. Second is the starting index from where I want to extract that string. and then I need to give the length, that how much I need to extract. Okay, basically it is helpful in extracting. You will see one more function which is very much equal to the substring function. We'll see that later. To start with mid functions, as I told you, there are 3 parameters we need to pass. So let me first pass the string value. Consider SQL training by uplats. Okay, now what I'm doing is I want to retrieve uh, only training by uplats. Okay, how do I do that? I give the starting index. So 1 2 3 4 5, it is 5. And let's say length, I know that there are so many characters here. Let us try to give a random big size length here. Okay, and let us try to see what we get. As you can see, I got my expected output. Now let us try to reduce this length to 25. It was still working. Now why I changed this was, sometimes it becomes very tedious. Suppose this is a very long sentence and you want to retrieve the entire length apart from the first section. Definitely there are some different functions that we will discuss, but for now, if you are using mid, and if this is a long statement for which you need to provide the length of the character, then in that case it is okay to use a high number so that all the words are included, because here you're not literally concerned about the length of the sentence. You just want to extract training by uplats, that is the remaining part of the sentence. Okay, so even with 25 it worked, and with 50 also it worked. So let us try to reduce this even more. Let us take it to 20. Still it is working fine. And now let us try to reduce it to 10. Now what will happen is that it has just retrieved the 10 characters from my statement. From SQL training by uplats, it has retrieved characters of length 10 starting from the 5th index, that is from T. Okay, so that was mid function for you. You can any day manipulate. Every time you can keep checking, you need not count it. Every time you can just keep increasing this number and check that what exactly is the length if you want to give a very optimized number. So that was mid function for you. We will also try to understand one more similar function, that is substring function, which is very much similar to mid function. Now what this substring does is it also extracts a substring from a string starting at any position. Even substring utilizes, it needs 3 arguments. One is the string from which you want to extract, and second argument will be the start argument, that is the starting index from where you want to extract, and then the length. Okay, so let's say I have something like this. Select, I have to give the string first, so let me give SQL uplats. Okay, then I want to again, okay, I did not mention the function name. That is the function name for substring, substr. Then I need to give the index from where I want to retrieve. Let's say I want to retrieve only uplats here. So what I will do is, that is starting from index number 5. Okay, space is also a character. So CS1 Q2 L3 space 4, and U will be 5. So that is my starting index. And then this is a very small statement. So here I can count and I can give exactly the number of length. Here it is 6. So I will give 6 as my length. I'll get my output, that is uplats. Suppose if I reduce even 1 from it, I will not get the expected output. Okay. So that was substring function. It works very similar to the mid function. Now, let me tell you, wait a minute. So in terms of flexibility, there is one more function that we learned about mid function. We learned about sub str. There is one more function, that is substring function. It is again very much similar to these two functions, but let us try to understand how it is different. Okay, even substring is going to work the same way. This is my function. Okay, now if I increase this is the output. So you could see that These three functions have given me exactly the same output which I was expecting. Okay, so how these three are different? So the basic answer to this is that the mid function, it requires three arguments, while this substring is little more flexible. Okay, that means in substring you need not give the length. You could have seen that in sub str and mid function it was mandatory that you give the length function, otherwise it will throw an error. Okay, let us try to take this off. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what is substring. Let me change it to mid. Okay, if I take it off, yeah, 5 6. Okay, and then I write the mid function here. So it gave me the output. If I take this off, it was taking the output. Okay, so okay, so even mid and sub str and substring, all the three functions are flexible. So if you don't give the length here, it is still fine. That means what is happening here is that it is by default taking the entire length of the statement. Okay, so if you don't give the length and you want the output to be something like this, you need not count length here. Okay, also yeah, let me run this with the other three functions. Okay, so here also I got my expected output. Let me pass substring here. I got my output. Okay, so as you can see that even if I don't pass length column to it, it is still fine. I am still getting my expected output. But whenever you want to retrieve the mid part of it, that means if I have something like this, okay, hello. Now I have not given the length. It will retrieve all the letters starting from the fifth index. Okay, but I want to retrieve only U plats. Then in that case, it is very much necessary that I give the length of the character that I want to see in my output, and that exactly will be printed in my statement. Okay, so that was about extraction, and also regarding the difference between these string functions. Both of them perform the same type of operation on string, as just as we have demonstrated. But the basic difference lies in how they indice their string characters. Okay. For example, if you have this string test, okay, then the mid function will indice the characters as 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. But with substring, they will be indiced as 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay. Now let us try to demonstrate that part. Okay. Right, let's see, I have this test here. If I say 0 or substring, I'll get nothing because it will not understand exactly that where to start from. If I give 1, then it will definitely understand where to start from. Okay, and same is the case with sub str. But if you try the similar thing with mid function, it will not yield the same output, because as I told you, there is this numbering, the indexing of the character is different. In mid function, it will indice as 1, 2, 3, 4, but with substring, this will be indiced as 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So that was about a basic small difference between mid and substring and sub str. Okay. Next, moving on to our function. We have seen now three main functions of extracting a substring from a string starting at any position. That was mid, sub str, and finally the substring. Okay. We will move on to one more interesting function, that is substring underscore index. Okay, Now what is this underscore index? This function will return a substring of a string before a specified number of delimiter occurs. That means, again, substring underscore index will take 3 parameters. One will be string, next will be delimiter, and third will be the number. Okay, let us try to demonstrate it to understand better. Select substring, we have index, then let us take SQL by uplats. Okay, and then if I, let's say, take, okay, let me give a delimiter here first. Underscore, underscore, and then I give underscore. This is my delimiter. Okay, and then if I say 1, we can see that it has given me only the first part. Okay, now what are these delimiters? You must have heard about delimiters. Semicolon, colon, or anything that is dividing your statement into different sections are your delimiters. Here, as you can see, my delimiter was underscore. Okay, now what this delimiter is doing is it is dividing one statement into 3 sections. SQL will become one section, by will become another section, and then uplats will become another section. Okay, now what we have to do here is that we have to just find out different sections based on the delimiter. Now if I use this here, okay, if I say 2, that means it wants both the sections against that is divided by this first underscore. If I say something like this, then I'll get the entire word. I'll get all the sections that are separated by this delimiter. Okay, let us try to increase this. Again, this will remain unchanged. If I increase this, it will remain unchanged. Let us try to give 0 here. Since it is 0, nothing will be given as an output, because 0 means we don't want anything. 5 means if there are 5 sections, give us 5 sections, at max to max 5 sections. Okay, anything less than that can also be given. So let us try to demonstrate few more examples. Now we will take this part off. Okay, now if I say 1, so only by is expected, SQL by is expected, because as you can see, with underscore there are 2 sections, that is SQL by on one side and uplats on the other side. Okay, now if I change this to 2, okay, now if I change this to 2, it will give me both the sections, SQL by and uplats. Okay, here it is. Now let me try to give few more examples to you guys so you can very well understand. Hello, then we have some more characters, world, then again we have something as uplats. Now you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 delimiters. That means we have 5 sections. So when I say 1, my output will be SQL by, SQL space by. That is my first section. Okay, if I say 2, so it will give me SQL by and uplats. If I say 3, it will give me 3 sections that are separated by underscore, and the reading of this delimiter is starting from left to right. Okay, just the way a statement is, it will always try to evaluate from left to right. So my leftmost part will become the first section, then second, then followed by third, fourth, and so on. Okay, so when I do write something like this, I get hello world, and my entire statement, if I want to print, then I get this. Okay, so that was a substring index for you guys. It is basically returning me the substring of a string before a specified number of delimiter occurs. and it utilizes three parameters. First one will be your actual string. Second argument will be the delimiter with which your statement is separated. And third will be the number, that how many sections you wish to see that are separated by your delimiter given. Okay. Also, let me tell you one thing. If I do something like this, okay, and if I pass one, sorry, just space. Now you can see that my delimiter here is a space, and in this statement there is just one space. So SQL will become my first section, and by uplads hello world uplads will become my another section. So if I pass 2 here, I'll get the entire statement. So even whatever you are passing in your second argument will be your delimiter. It can be anything starting from space or any special character. It could be at the rate, it could be underscore, it could be hyphen. Whatever is your delimiter, you can specify that in your second argument. So that was substring underscore index for you. And with this, since we have already talked a lot about index, in our next lecture, we will be moving forward with some indexing functions where we'll try to play around with the positions of a string. We'll try to understand the indexes of a string that is stored in the memory of the database system. These are the string functions. And now next lecture, we are going to continue with some index functions, which will help us get a better clarity, which will help us get a better clarity over the indexing of any particular sentence, that how it is being indexed in the backend system. How do we read that whenever we need to retrieve something? So that we'll come to know. And we have some specific functions for it. For now, our ritual. Thank you from uplads. Message. Thank you guys. Hope it was a helpful session for you. These are very basic functions that you might need to keep a record of, because sometimes, as I have already mentioned it so many times, that it might happen that it's a very simple thing to do and MySQL already has a function defined for it. But what we do is we don't know about such functions, and we tend to write more number of code, more lines of code for manipulating our data. So that's all for today. In next lecture, we will finish our indexing, and we will finish string functions, and we will give a little bit of we'll learn about basics of numerical functions. Just as string functions, we also have some numeric functions with us, how to understand and handle numbers. Few we have already discussed while talking about various issues and scenarios. In next lecture, we'll try to cover that up as well. Stay tuned. Thank you from uplads.